Howdy, boys and girls. If you watched my last video about the delivery and non-payment issues, you're probably asking yourself the same question as me. Мужчина, вы на следующий выходите? Well, I'm joking. That's the Russian. Has nothing to do with brokers. But I thought I would record a video. It's slippery. I would record a video on this, how to deal with. Are we recording? Yeah. How to deal with brokers. My beauty is over there. It's very cold today in Cambridge, Ontario. The weather is, the temperature is minus 11 Celsius. And I finally downloaded that app that some guys were saying. So now I have an app on my phone, which is very useful for quick conversion between Celsius and Fahrenheit. In minus 11 Celsius, I think when I looked it up, it was 12F. So this is the temperature when diesel fuel starts solidifying, gelling up. And if you bought your fuel in Florida or Texas and then you just come here, you might not be able to start your truck. And I just came out here to the river to see what's going on. I thought it would be all frozen, but as you can see, like, yeah, the river is frozen, but it's still coming from under the ice over there. I just like this spot, you know, you can see those churches in over there. Very nice. Just the sun is very bright. But yeah, so basically, of course, the best way not to have payment issues is not to deal with brokers at all, right? But then you cannot live with them, you cannot live without them. And especially for somebody who's starting out, I recommend using factoring companies. Okay, it's expensive, but especially if it's non-recourse, which means that you're paid, and no matter what happens after, it's not your responsibility. They will never take the money back. But for that they charge a slightly higher interest. It's so beautiful over here, and it's very safe. We don't have any sharks or anything. Not like, you know, if this was Florida, it would be really dangerous. Yeah, and for people from Florida, this white stuff, we call it snow. Or actually, sometimes we just call it white stuff, you know. And it's very useful. The major purpose is you use it to clean the windshield. You just throw it on the windshield and it cleans it up. Speaking about the car, I'm waiting for my those fat pipes, blasting bobs. And they should be here Wednesday, and we're gonna replace the rear part and install my install these babies over here, these Flow Masters. Sorry for the mess. I don't know what this underwear is doing there. It's not supposed to be there. Who put it in there? I have no clue. So let's continue inside the car. It's very cold because my hand is just freezing. And this time I remembered to okay, hold on. I remembered to switch on stabilization. And so yeah, so the best way to avoid payment issues is to use a factoring company. Recourse, non-recourse, the fee ranges from, I don't know, 2.9% to 5%, and usually higher interest is for non-recourse, meaning that you're paid within a few hours after submitting your paperwork, and you don't care what happens afterwards, whether they'll be able to get their money or not. But what this does is that this protects you from bad brokers, you know. And what's funny, like this incident, right, with the 20% missing or short paid, they call it short paid invoice, happened to me. This is the first time since I started trucking in October 2017 on my own, under my own name. And this is one of the few cases where my factoring company said, no, we don't want to factor this unless you want to go with recourse, meaning that they will take my money back if they cannot get the money from the customer, right? And just to compare, this broker is from Texas. And the only other time I had a cash deal or COD with somebody from Texas was, if you look through my older videos, you might find that old ugly, I think it was a excavator, like very old excavator. Everything was like chain drive. I loaded it in Bolton, Ontario at the Ritchie Brothers, and I took it to Texas. And those guys, you know, I think they were like, you know, Mexicans, well, at least Mexican background, but living in Texas. And I was so afraid that I was dealing with some kind of Mexican mafia, because it was a cash payment, but they paid me, everything was cool, very nice, you know, people. And these guys, you know, like, whereas over there, with that big excavator, I was really, you know, afraid that something bad would happen. And actually, I remember asking them to prepay. I think I told them, like, give me a couple of thousands by wire just to make sure that you have the money. And then the rest was paid by cash, right? And this time I didn't do that. And this is what happens. And so, yeah, like I mentioned in the video, like this COD stuff, I'm not going to do it again. Unless it's payment on loading, okay? Because what happened here, basically, if the credit is bad, I'm gonna request this, like either you factor, I factor your invoice. If I cannot factor, you need to prepay me. And of course, most of the time they say no, because they have some, you know, thoughts about, so maybe they won't have to pay you at all, you know. But you load it, you take a picture on your deck of the load on your deck, you send them wiring instructions, they send you a confirmation, you start tracking once you have the confirmation that the money was sent, you know, confirmed, the money left the bank of the broker and it's on the way to you. And then of course you make sure that you don't deliver until you physically see the money in your account, because sometimes it takes 2-3 days, right, for the money to arrive. Especially if it's, you know, let's say US to Canada, Canada to US. Inside US, of course, it's much faster, or inside Canada. But what the problem with COD is, yeah, of course, you're not supposed to unload before you have a check in your hand, you know, like in my case, this was a trailer, right? I should have stayed hooked to the trailer, you know, not remove all the flags and the signs, right? But what you guys probably missed is that on the day before, I said I called this guy, right? When I was running late because of the short daylight hours, right? I arrived in Cambridge on the day before. It was just within my 30-minute window, you know, after sunset. I couldn't, and it was still 60 miles more, 100 kilometers to this guy in Vaughan, Ontario, right? And so I shut down in my yard and I called him, I told him, and I asked him, I said, are you ready with the money? He says, yes. And I said, the amount, that's the amount you have? And the guy says, yeah. But he was like, the tone was a bit, you know, kind of like hesitant, right? But he confirms he has the money, right? So, like, where do we live? We don't live somewhere in, I don't know, South Africa where people kill each other for a loaf of bread, right? Like, you gotta trust somebody. So the guy says he has the money. Okay, so I go there. He meets me and in the truck, and he waves to me, like basically follow me, and then he tells me what to park. And as soon as I back into that space, some guys showed up and they start basically doling down, you know, dropping the legs, and they put timbers on. Nobody said anything about the payment, and I'm like, okay, so I guess that shouldn't be a problem, right? And then of course I disconnect, I take all my flags off, and then I go inside the office, and that's when I have a big surprise, you know. The guy says, no, not that amount. Here's the amount. I had a different deal with them, so it's 20% less. And I said, wait, I talked to you yesterday about this. I asked you about how much money you have, and you said yes to my figure, to my number. And this guy says, that was yesterday. And so that's what happened. That's what can happen with COD. Basically, yeah, you say, hey, COD on the cash on delivery, right? And then, you know, how do you know? Do you go to the guy's yard? Because of course, unless you're sure, you want to stay somewhere off-site, right? Because maybe you go inside and they lock the gate and you have no choice but to drop the trailer or the load, right? So you want to be somewhere off-site to make sure that they have the money. But how do you know? You call them, right? But what if they lie to you? Like in this case, right? The guy says yes, and then I showed up and he doesn't have the money. And so yeah, COD is it's a very stupid way to do things, you know. Prepayment, option B, and option A is factoring. And option C, if you don't care, if you're rich and you can wait 90 days for your payment, probably then you shouldn't be even trucking at all, you know. But a new development happened with this broker, whose name starts with Freight Connect Logistics, but we don't want to call names, but just to give you a hint. I sent them a bunch of emails because, you know, like, how long does it take to send a PayPal payment, right? And the guy says 12 o'clock they send it to the accounting department. And so my accounting department was waiting for their accounting department to send the money. I know it takes me, I don't know, 20 seconds to send somebody money from my computer, but my accounting department is very small, right? It's just me, basically. So the driver tells the president, okay, we're good. And the president tells the accountant, fire away, huh? You push the button, the money is gone. But that's the advantage of being small, you know. You don't have to consult 20 people on what you're doing next. So basically, I sent them a bunch of emails. First I sent them an invoice from PayPal. You know, on PayPal, you can request the money from somebody, or you can create an invoice, right? And so that's what I did. I created an invoice. I sent it to this guy. And actually, by mistake, I also sent it to the agent, to the girl I worked with. And so then I see a summary. It says, you requested basically 2 invoices. And I'm like, I only wanted 1, right? But it looks like PayPal understood that I wanted double the money, you know? Anyway, and then I sent them 3 o'clock. Nothing, right? No news. 3 hours after, they send the money to the account. They send the request to the accounting department. And so at 3 o'clock, I go inside the PayPal to see if maybe there's something I missed. Like usually they send you an email, right, when you receive money. And I go in there and I click on these invoices that I submitted earlier, and I see there's a button that says remind. You know, so you click remind, and the screen pops up and it says, you know, who do you want to remind? This address or this address? Like, because I sent 2 invoices, right? And I said this one, the main one, the manager of this company. And it sends away and basically says reminder, balance owing is this one, right? That was at 3 o'clock. And then waiting 4 or 5, and they're 1 hour, I think they're on Central Time, but I'm not 100%. But at 4 o'clock, I sent them kind of like the final message. I said, if I don't receive payment confirmation before 5 o'clock, because this, Friday, right? End of the week. If I don't receive the payment confirmation before 5, or before you leave the office, I'm gonna complain to the load board where I booked this load from. No reply, nothing. So I wait till maybe like 5:45, and then I go to my load board, and I see a link that I click on the link that says report a business, and I check the conditions, and if it's basically total non-paid invoice, basically if you did work and somebody didn't pay you at all, they don't want you to report right away. They want you to wait, because they know that usually it can take 15, 30, 60 days, sometimes 90 days to get paid. But if it's a short pay, which is exactly what happened to me, right? So the guy paid me. He didn't say no, like, hey, drop the thing and we're not gonna pay you. No, they paid me, but they short paid me, right? And turns out on my load board, short pay can be reported immediately, And so I click on that link, and there's kind of like a form pops out, and you just enter some information, like the MC number, US DOT number, address, what's the amount, what was the original amount, what's the balance they owe now, and then your contact info, and then they say, okay, we'll be in touch. Just they're gonna send them, what they do is they send them kind of like an email, or they call them, and they give them 7 days to resolve this. And why I'm talking about this is basically we're talking about what you can do when you run into this situation like similar to mine, when somebody doesn't pay you at all. So that's step number 1. The easiest one is to report them to the load board. If you book this from a load board, and what happens is the load board has its own internal credit rating system, right? It's not going to affect their credit like overall, but on this particular load board, people who sign up for premium account, like either brokers or carriers, they have access to these, credit ratings and how many days to pay, how many days the guy or the girl takes to pay, right? And so that's what this reporting will affect. So if I report this business, their name will be somewhere in the kind of like a bad boys list, and other people that want to deal with them, and when they check their credit, they will see this kind of like a strike against their credit. But again, this only affects this load board, right? So it's very easy to do, doesn't take long, but it's probably not very effective, because they can just close this account and go to a different load board, right? So that's step number 1. And I did not know this until it happened to me, because then I started researching what I can do. And so then a friend of mine sent me a link to, like, he says, why don't you file against their bond? And I said, I have no idea how it's done, And so he sent me a link. There was a story on one of trucking websites with detailed instructions where to go, what to do, And so that's step number 2, or option number 2. If the load board cannot help you, if the guy is still not paying or not paying the balance, you can follow that procedure that you can find online and file a claim against their bond. And this has to be sent to the insurance company that gave the broker the bond, right? And they can pay you because it's insurance, right? Or some of these bad brokers, they owe money to everybody, and there's just not enough insurance to cover that, And so, of course, because of that, it's not 100% watertight case that you will be paid. Just, yeah, you will affect their credit, right? So there'll be a record somewhere, like open to a much wider audience than just when you report it to a load board. But there's always option 3. Like option 3, you can hire a lawyer, like a collection lawyer or a collection company, right? And they will try to collect this money from the broker. The problem, of course, is that usually they don't work for free, right? And so what some guys told me, like a friend told me that what you can do is just tell them to seek additional damages. So let's say if the guy owes you, I don't know, $500 and the lawyer wants, $500, so you just tell him to seek $1,000, right? So then that when he gets that $1,000, he takes $500 for himself and you take $500, right? So everybody's happy. The lawyer gets his cut, you get your money, and the only loser in this is the greedy broker who didn't want to pay. And so those are the 3 steps that you can do to get the payment, and those are the 2 things that I said you can do to avoid getting into this situation, right? Either using factors or full prepayment. And the last thing I want to mention is that I did hear today, for some reason, from this manager at the broker company. I sent him an email. Yeah, when I did that reporting, I sent him an email. I said non-payment reported in the subject line, and I attached the little email I got from my load board when they received my submission, so to speak, right? It says what's going to happen next, that they have 7 days to respond, and so I attached all that and I sent it to these guys, and this guy replies to me. He says, "It's all cool. We send the paperwork to accounting Friday afternoon, but because they close early. No, they close on weekends, so they should do it Monday." And the subject line says non-payment reported, right? And I sent him a reply and I say, "Okay, cool." I said, "Once I have the money, I will withdraw my complaint." And the guy again responds. He says, "What complaint?" "Never mind, it's all good." So basically, nobody reads emails, I sent him an email, right, saying that I reported your non-payment, and then 2 times I emailed them before saying that, you have until 5. Nobody cares, Basically, with emails, unlike phone calls, you never know. Did they read it? Like you walking around up and down your office there or your hotel room, and you ready to tear your hair out, and you send them angry messages, nobody cares. So sometimes it's okay to, it's actually better, more effective to use a phone, but then of course they're not going to answer, right? But it's funny. I say it again. Non-payment reported. He says everything is cool. You should be paid Monday. What non-payment? And I left him some messages on Facebook. Actually, that's what I said in one of my emails. I said, if you don't pay, I'm going to create some publicity, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, stuff like that. And I try to find them on Maps, on Google Maps. You know how you can leave a review. These guys don't even have any listing, because when I punch in that address, it shows as a residential address just south of Fort Wayne, Texas. So anyway, check this out. The sun went down, and now it's not as bright outside because I tried to record, facing this way, and the sun was in the back and going straight into the camera, and it was super bright. But I love filming with this camera because it has a tracking focus. I can see and it has a that flip out screen, so I can see myself, and it has a 10 to 18 millimeter lens. You see this? And so tracking, and it has stabilization, you know. Very cool. I like this little camera. And so we're using Canon Rebel T7i with a super cheap 1018 Canon f4.5 5.6 10 to 18 millimeter lens, and I'm using a small micro Rodeo micro mic, which of course is not very helpful inside the car, but it still makes the audio, you know, a bit better. Otherwise it sounds like you are in a closet, you know. And you can see the setup in the mirror over there. You can see that's my screen, the lens, the mic. See, everything is cool. Okay, so Saturday, and what I did today also was I sent a payment of $18.71 to New York RPC New York State Tax Department. That's my contribution for the past 3 months, for the last 3 months in 2018. And this time it was actually, each time I do it, it gets easier and easier, because basically I take the form I filled out last time, right, and everything is there. Just have to change the dates, like reporting dates, and put the amount of kilometers or miles in there. The rate is already there. And just, you know, save it on a USB thing, go to a printer, print it out, sign, and go to the bank, get the bank draft or cashier's check. And one thing I found out is that turns out they allow US dollar checks from my US dollar account. So I said, yeah, let's order them, and they're free for me, you know, because I have a US dollar account in my Canadian bank. And until recently I didn't have this, and it was always a struggle. Like, let's say if I hire an escort in the States, you know, like a pilot car to, you know, escort an oversized load. Not that escort, you know, like escort pilot service. And some of them don't take any credit cards, right? And they say either cash or check, but they don't want to take Canadian check because it's Canadian funds and it's drawn on a Canadian bank, right? So this one, it'll be all, when it's US dollars, it's always drawn on their partner American bank, you know. And so I'll have that. And speaking about America, US, I still have this guy who's interested in working with me as driver, and I found a lawyer, like I mentioned, who worked for a long time as a consultant, as a freelance writer for the same magazine. And so I paid them the fee. I have the receipt. I forwarded it to him. I said, so how are we gonna do this? Email or phone? But of course he's busy, so I said, you know, let me know if you could let me know Monday. I said, I'm between loads now, I have time, so let's do it. And one more thing is happening is that my Fontaine dealer received the parts for the trailer, and it's that pin, the locking pin in the gooseneck. It was kind of like catching. It's very difficult to open, you know, pull out and push in. And they received that, and they received the bracket, but the bracket would take like, I don't know, 6-8 hours to replace because they have to cut, weld back, and I really don't want to do that. But I want to just try to see if we can just replace that pin, the big heavy, you know, kind of like a cylinder shape with a handle. I think mine is just maybe bent a little bit, you know, but they were too busy before I left the last time, and so we're gonna try to do it this week, and then I'm gonna go to Buffalo, pick up my fat pipes, the resonator delete kit. Okay, thanks for watching, take care.